Hey everybody, it's Mr. Shepherd here talking about our science writing prompt. Just want to review this first page here to make sure we are aware of, first off, why it's there. You'll always have this anytime we do one of our science writing prompts. And right now, if you take a look at where it says the task, that's not going to change anytime soon. And so let's take a second here to look at it. It says you'll have 25 minutes to read and annotate this text to identify the main idea. That's the first part. The second part is you have to use pieces of evidence from the text to support the main idea in a written summary. If you take a look down here on your rubric, the criteria for proficiency for summarizing, it says the student writes a summary free from bias. Remember, bias is anytime you have a personal opinion. So right now, your job is not to have a personal opinion and simply state the facts from the article. It says, so it's free from bias that names the central idea in supporting evidence from the text. The summary is clear and coherent. Coherent means understandable. It also accounts for your handwriting. A lot of you are struggling with clean handwriting that is easy to read. And if I'm not able to read it, it's not going to get the score that it might actually deserve. You also need to make sure it's organized appropriately for the text. So it has to be set up like a summary. I'll show you an example here in a minute or so. So it has to be appropriate for the text, task, purpose, and audience. If you take a look at the other ones here, close to, far to go, but can get there and not yet, you will want to look at those when you get your scores back and see where you're at and compare that to what I'm talking about in this recorded mini lesson and figure out how we can get you up tier to proficient. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our first summary that we did, which was the science of earthquakes. And this was actually quite a long article. And one thing that a lot of you struggled with was you really only summarize a few parts of it. And so if I was to scroll down, I mean, that's a decent amount of words there that some of you really just, for example, only summarize what is an earthquake and didn't talk about anything else that the article went on to talk about. And so with that in mind, I'm going to show you an example of a student work sample that I typed in and made a few grammar corrections so it'd be a better example to actually look at. That they actually scored a 4 on. So here's our example. Again, this is typed in here, but it was slightly edited to be on here as well. And so I'm going to read through here and kind of point out a couple things of why I did what I did. And your job during this time is to be thinking about, hey, how can I make mine look like this, and how can I compare this to the example that's on here. So the first thing I did was I had to identify the main idea. And so, when I'm reading this, I look through and I look for this person here. They wrote in the article. Now, I know for a fact in your language arts classes that you are taught something very similar to this part right here. In the article, The Science of Earthquakes, the main idea is, and then this person went on to talk about what the main idea is. So it says, is what earthquakes are and how they are measured / predicted by scientists. Some people stop right there. And so if you were to go back and look at your writing prompt, you would notice that that's that part right there. All done and good to go. However, what you didn't do was this part right here. So in this example, they went on to actually talk about all the different details that were mentioned in the article. Now, what they did not do was they did not simply go through and list or restate each of the headers. I'm not looking for a repetition of what is said in the article. That's really not any kind of good writing at all. And so remember, the purpose of writing a summary is putting into your own words so that you can show your understanding and that either yourself or somebody else reading it can know what the article is talking about. And so if you need to, go back and read this article. It's online now because you will not have the paper copy anymore. But it's online in our Schoology accounts for you to go back and get the link to it. And so this person broke down their article pretty much from. I mean, they went in chronological order as the article was stated, but instead of simply repeating what it said, they kind of added their own words to it. And so that's one option, which the person mainly did, but they actually started out with a direct quote, which you, if you remember from language arts, is an appropriate style of summary writing. But notice that the whole thing is not quoted. It's only one small part, actually. So it says, according to the text, earthquakes happen when, quote, two blocks of the earth called tectonic plates suddenly slip past one another, end quote. This person goes on to say that these earthquakes happen due to movement of tectonic plates in the crust, which is the top layer of the earth. The other layers are mantle, outer core, and inner core. So if I go back over here, this person talked about this part, and they talked about the layers of the earth. And so, again, that's in their own words, kind of in their own writing style that they went through. And so I'm assuming then they're going to talk about why does the earth shake when there's an earthquake next. So notice there's also a new paragraph here. It says, over time, energy is built up because the tectonic plates want to slide past each other. When that energy is released, you end up feeling an earthquake. So there we go. That part right there summarized why does the earth shake when there's an earthquake. It goes on to say that the first movement someone would feel in an earthquake is a P wave followed by an S wave, which is slower. For some reason, talking specifically about this article, a lot of you included this one detail right here, which is awesome that you picked that out. But notice all this other stuff you forgot. Okay, the P and S waves are important in how scientists are describing earthquakes, but without all this other prior knowledge before that, you would have no idea why that's important. So you've got to make sure you paint the entire story, or in this case, write the entire story so that somebody reading it knows why you're writing that. It goes on to say, scientists are able to measure these waves using a tool called a seismograph. According to the text, so here we go, we have another quote. Most of the time, I suggest quoting something that you really don't know how you could say it any better, or something that's really hard to not replicate exactly what it said. Okay, and so they said, quote, the seismograph has a base that sits firmly in the ground and a heavy weight that hangs free. I really don't know how else I would describe that. So I agree that this person should have left that as it was, and they did. They go on to say that these readings then determine the size of the earthquake. You always sealed P waves before the S waves, similar to lightning and thunder. Lastly, scientists have a hard time predicting earthquakes, and most of the times can only try and alert people when it happens. So notice there's a transition word to indicate that I'm wrapping up my summary, and then of course finishing it. So a couple of things I also want to point out here is a scientific writing is much different than something you would write for language arts. So it's not meant to be a story, as like, descriptive narrative, like what am I trying to say? There's no fluff. You're not adding in the little extra details just to be more creative in your writing. A scientific summary is pretty much down to the facts, and that's it. And so yes, you had a large article to summarize, but really, if you just picked out those most important, which is one of our thinking strategies of determining importance, and you picked out those key parts of each section, you would have a pretty decent summary, just like this example is right here. So as you go through and look at yours and review it and move on from this point to write another summary, hopefully some of these points will stick out to you as a good example. And if you need to watch this video again, it will be available to you online.